Hello, everyone. My name is Jose Hernandez. I'm from United Spinal Association.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica with BCID.
Today we have Hilda from the Department of Transportation, and she's going to give us a lot of, new things coming on with DOT and things that we can do to advocate on our behalf when it comes to DOT. So Hilda, please introduce yourself and.
Oh, forgot, bro.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's been a while. Sorry.
It has been a while. So you guys can go ahead and chat amongst yourselves in the chat box. If you have any direct questions that you want us to answer, attempt to answer, you should go ahead and put them in the Q&A section instead.
Um, Also, we do have closed captioning available by clicking on the closed captioning button below, or if you wanted the full stream, you can click on the link that I'm putting into the chat box.
Now.
Now,
Great. Thank you so much, Jose and Jessica, and to the United Spinal Association and Brooklyn Ford Center for Independence for giving us the opportunity to present today on the work that DOT does. My name is Hilda Cardenas. I am the mobility coordinator at the New York City Department of Transportation, and I will be sharing a little more about what our program does, but I'll pass it on to my colleagues who are also joining us today to answer some of the questions that you may have later in the Q&A. So I'll pass it on to Nicole.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicole Altmix. I'm Executive Director of Planning for the PedRent program at DOT.
Clarice, if you can go next, and then Bill. Oh, Clarice, are you with us? Oh, Bill, you can go next, please.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Harrison. I am a Special Projects Coordinator with New York City Department of Transportation's Division of Traffic Operations. Specifically, I work on signals and street lighting.
Great, thank you. And we'll try Clarice one more time. Okay, well, I know sometimes we, in this virtual world, we do have some technical issues, but I'll, hopefully she will be able to join us in a little bit. Okay, so let me start by sharing my screen here. And if the team can give me a thumbs up just to make sure that they can see my screen. Perfect, great, thank you very much. And feel free to, Jose and Jessica, if there's any issues throughout the presentation, let me know. So yes, again, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to share some of the work that we have been doing at the New York City Department of Transportation. As I mentioned, I am with the mobility management program here at DOT. Well, not here anymore because many of us are working from home, but still in the spirit of here in DOT, if you will. So let me go on to the next. There we go. Okay, so what is the New York City Department of Transportation, right? Many of you may already be familiar with the agency, but just to give you a brief overview of what we do at DOT. So we are the city agency. There's so many other agencies, but we are one of the city agencies responsible for the safe movement of pedestrians. As you're walking on the street, going to the park, goods. Many of us are getting a lot of deliveries now through different companies that we are ordering. So we are responsible for making sure that you are getting also those goods, right? As well as the vehicular traffic on the streets. And this, of course, includes personal vehicles as well as buses and Accessoride, if that's one of the services that we use. We're also responsible for highways and waterways in New York City. So the mobility management program within DOT is a small group, a very busy group that collaborates and improves mobility for New Yorkers who have and continue to be historically excluded, underserved in locations throughout the city in the transportation planning process. And this, of course, includes New Yorkers with disabilities, many of whom happen to also be older adults, low income or limited English population groups. So we are looking at these particular target populations because we understand that there is a need to ensure that we can include, and that these populations can all be part of the conversation when it comes to planning. I apologize for the sounds that I have going on in the background. I'm just going to make sure that I close my email so that you don't hear the beeping. There we go. Okay, so how do we do this, right? How do we make sure that we improve mobility for this population? So there are different ways in which we do that. One is by developing resources and tools that our staff at DOT, as well as residents in the city, are able to use. And I will be sharing more on this resource as we continue this conversation today. We also meet and collaborate with community organizations, like the organizations that we are coordinating with today, to make sure that there is a relationship and an understanding of what are the needs of members like yourselves. What are some of the things that you keep bringing up maybe at your monthly meetings if you get together, if you have focus groups? What are the things related to transportation that are important to you, so that we can collaborate and understand what those issues are, right? So that's part of the reason why we really try to communicate with different community organizations to make sure that that is happening. We also conduct public engagement, such as like the one that we're holding today, to present on the work that we do, but not only to present on what we offer as an agency in terms of accessibility, but to understand the mobility issues or challenges that you may experience out on the street, at a particular street corner, or just throughout the city. So if you're wondering, well, what about public transportation, right? DOT does not oversee public transportation. We do not oversee the subway or the bus or the accessory service systems. Those are the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, which, as you may know, is a separate public authority. However, that's not to say that we still coordinate with the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, with MTA, to improve bus service throughout the city. Give me 1 second here, make sure that I get to go to my next slide. Okay. There we go. So now, what are the responsibilities of DOT? What are we responsible for? So one, we maintain over 6,000 miles of the street, right? So if you're an accessory ride or if you drive on the roadway, we are responsible for maintaining that, as well as over 12,000 miles of sidewalks. And over 700 bridges and tunnels. So we maintain a lot of infrastructure. We're a big city, and so we have a lot of responsibilities. But in the process of doing that, we also promote other modes of transportation, sustainable modes of transportation, through different street designs that encourage walking, as well as, if you have a wheelchair, that you're able to get around the city in a way that is safe, and more importantly, that is comfortable. We also certainly look for ways to improve cycling in the city, especially during the pandemic. That has increased the demand for cycling. So we understand that, right? There's so many different types of users on the street that we need to make sure the streets are safer, as well as making sure that everyone's able to use public spaces. So let me go to my next slide here. Now, certainly COVID-19 has presented a lot of challenges to all of us, right? And certainly transportation hasn't been the exception. And so in the spring of last year, when New York pause went into effect, when we had the lockdown, we were required to not have non-essential businesses statewide. They were all closing. So this posed a lot of challenges, but also an opportunity to find innovative ways to work with the spaces that we have to be able to promote and accommodate proper physical distancing and prevent infections. So DOT has been researching, testing, and also implementing innovative solutions that hopefully work with everybody. We have also been doing a lot to ensure that we are including the populations that I mentioned so that we understand what may be some of the challenges or new challenges that are coming up as a result of these new implementations. Two examples of that include open streets, which is an effort to increase miles on the street for more pedestrian and cyclists to enjoy public spaces, while also, as I mentioned before, maintaining that physical distancing. Similarly, there's another effort, our open restaurants program, which temporarily extends outdoor seating options for food establishments and bars. A little bit more on this, which we do not expand a lot on a resource guide that I will be expanding a little more throughout this presentation, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview because as we were developing the guide that I'll be sharing with you, the pandemic was happening. And so some of these programs, the open streets and restaurants programs, was still being developed and it's still in development. But a little bit of an overview for both of these programs. Open Streets provides new public spaces, right? What does that mean? That means that we are prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists by transforming the streets into public spaces. So you as a pedestrian have more space where you can walk in addition to the sidewalks, which can easily get crowded. This is, of course, in coordination and partnership with local community organizations who have been an incredible support. And we acknowledge that without their help, we wouldn't have been able to make many of these programs possible. So the image that I'm showing on the left here is an illustration of what a typical temporary limited local access open street looks like, right? So we will put barriers along the street segment with signs notifying that this is a special road, that we have closed it, and local vehicles are allowed into the street segment, but they must go at 5 miles per hour or less. This is to ensure that any pedestrians or people in cycling or people in wheelchairs have enough space and feel safe to use this space. Another example of an open street is what we call a temporary full closure. In this case, there's no vehicle access and no parking allowed in this particular, when temporary full closure are in effect. What that means is we will transform a street segment and pedestrianize it. So businesses in that street segment have the option to bring out chairs and tables so they can, they can have an opportunity to revamp their business as well, since that has been a major issue as a result of COVID. Open restaurants, on the other hand, which is a part of open streets, allows food establishments to place outdoor seating in front of their establishments, on the sidewalk or on the roadway. You might have seen this in your neighborhood where more people are starting to use the road or also the sidewalk while following guidelines to ensure that we do provide enough space on the sidewalk for pedestrians to walk through. Of course, this effort came as a way of helping businesses rebound in these very difficult economic times. So there's a little bit of an overview of something that has been a new innovative way of dealing with COVID-19. One of the things that I mentioned we do is find ways to communicate with the public in general. And in 2015, we published our first mobility management resource guide. Some of you might have seen it before. Last year, we updated it. And this year, earlier in the year, we published the 2021 mobility management resource guide. As the title suggests, it is a guide designed for both staff at the New York City Department of Transportation, but also to the community in general at the New York City, to learn about the different transportation programs and services that we offered, and learn about some of the street improvement programs that we have at DOT. Like I mentioned before, making sure that we have spaces that are safer for everyone to utilize. We also include information on transit services from neighboring counties, right? Long Island, as well as Westchester, are in close proximity to New York City, and we understand that everyone is traveling to and from these locations, and so the guide was able to put all of the information pertaining to the transportation services that these areas offered, so that you can have a one-stop shop guide that you can refer to. And of course, we also included New York City, our Department of Transportation initiatives and programs, which I will be expanding a little bit more on next. So some of the transportation programs that we are highlighting in this guide include the City Bench program, which is a program that provides public seating options that make New York City streets more comfortable. We have installed over 2,100 or a little over 2,000 city benches citywide. The public, like yourselves, can suggest different locations on public sidewalks or city on property where we can install these public options, making your trip to the store or to the hospital or to whatever the destination it is that you're going, you can have a comfortable spot where you can relax or sit. Certainly, we welcome suggestions for city benches, and we prioritize your requests based on bus stops that may not have a sheltered. Bus shelters generally do provide seating options, but if you are close to a bus location that doesn't have a sheltered, that could potentially be a really good location for a city bench. Other locations that we prioritize include sidewalks near transit facilities, like the subway as well, senior centers, municipal buildings, and commercial and shopping zones, right? So the picture on the left is actually of a woman during the winter time sitting on a city bench pretty close to the Queens Center Mall. So that's a busy area. There's a lot of buses going through, and a busy area where people go and shop. And so that would be one location where ideally that benefited from a city bench or public seating. The other program that we have include, and some of you may be familiar, may have seen this in the city, include the accessible pedestrian signals. These are the push button devices that communicate information through audio in a non-visual manner when it's time for you, for the pedestrian, to cross the street. This particular device comes with different elements. One of them is a locating tone. So if you're someone with a vision disability, you will still be able to hear that locating tone that lets you know there is an APS near a particular street corner that you're about to cross. There's a spoken message that lets you know when it's time to cross the street. It will tell you to walk or to wait, depending on what the interval is showing on the pedestrian sign. The device also comes equipped with an ambient noise adjustment system. What that means is, if let's say you're at a busy street intersection, the tone, the locating tone of the APS will get higher in adjusting itself to the volume of vehicles that are around if it's too loud. So you can still be able to hear that locating tone and know that there's an APS if there is one at that particular corner. There's also a vibro-tactile button, which after you press the button of the APS, it will start vibrating when it's time to cross the street. So this way, you can also have that tactile feel to know when it's time to cross the street. And of course, the button comes equipped with a raised arrow, which indicates the direction in which you would be walking after pressing the button and when it's time to cross the street. We also have our pedestrian ramp program, which launched in 2017, and it improves and maintains the city's current pedestrian ramps. Some of you may know them as curb cuts, and so this particular program follows the local and federal design standards to ensure that there are ramps at street corners and mid-block crossings and medians throughout the city, to ensure that people on wheelchairs, as well as people with vision disabilities, have an accessible way of coming onto the sidewalk or going onto the street. a very critical part of the upgrade of all the pedestrian ramps has been to include detectable warning surfaces. That is the technical transportation term that we use to refer to the bumpy texture that some of you may have encountered at some of the pedestrian ramp locations, right? Those are required by law, and we do follow the guidelines, the design and the dimensions that are required by the ADA, which comes from the federal government. We also have a survey assessment map. I'll be sharing the link in a little bit once I'm done with the presentation, so that you can find out where we are at in installing the pedestrian ramps and if there's one coming next to your neighborhood or your street. We also have our parking permits program, which is a program responsible for issuing parking permits for people with disabilities. New York City residents who are who have a permanent or temporary disability may be eligible for also the New York State Disability Parking Permit hang tag, which is what is shown on the image at the bottom of a windshield. We have a hang tag hanging from the rear mirror of a card. So if you are eligible, that is something that we'll be able to do through the parking permits program. Now, the state permit may be valid up to 5 years, and it expires. It always expires the last date of the month. Our permit and customer service unit call center, they handle all the inquiries primarily from people with disabilities, and some of the processes or some of the processes that they would handle include the renewal process and application status. We are joined by one of our colleagues from DOT from this particular group. So if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer this for you during the Q&A. And last but not least, we also have a language access program. We understand that people in New York City may have different language access needs. These include someone speaking a different language, could be Spanish, could be Russian, could be Chinese, right? Could be ASL. So this program provides a full range of language services to ensure that all New Yorkers, regardless of the language that they speak, are able to access the information on the services that we as an agency, DOT, provide. Some of these services include translations. So let's say if you will like the guide that we published earlier this year, if you would like it to be in a particular language, because maybe you have family, or maybe you work with an organization that works particularly with a certain demographic and they speak a certain language, we can certainly have a request, or you can put a request to have this guide translated into that language. We want to make sure that people are able to access information in a language that they feel comfortable with. Similarly, interpretation is one of the things that we provide at public meetings. Today, our hosts have been kind enough to provide captioning and also ASL as well. But in general, when DOT is providing or is holding public meetings, we need to ensure that those services are provided so that if you have a request for those accommodations, we can provide that. Plain language, we understand that sometimes working in the transportation field, we may be using technical jargon. To a lot of people, it may sound foreign unless you are a little familiar with the terminology. So we make sure that our guide actually, is an example of that, where we made sure that we are defining the things that you might see on the street in a way that you can understand. So you know what that means. You know what they are, what the purpose of that particular treatment on the street is. We also have, of course, as I mentioned, multi-language signage in different languages, and this particular program also provides staff training and student internships. So this is a quick overview of what we offered and the things that we talked about in the Mobility Management Resource Guide. But we do invite you to provide us your feedback and also to let us know what are some of the challenges that you may be finding in general when navigating the city, or if you have specific questions in general about the work that we do. This is our contact information. That's my name, Hilda Cardenas, and I'm including my email address, which if you are joining by phone, I'm more than happy to say it aloud. That would be mobilitymanagement@dot.nyc.gov, Once again, my email address is mobilitymanagement@dot.nyc.gov. Now, if you do not have an email and wish to communicate with us via phone, we do have a telephone number, and that is 212-839-3260. Once again, that's 212-839-3260. You may or may not be familiar with our new ADA coordinator and disability service facilitator, Edmund Asidu. So you're more than welcome to also contact Edmund and with any questions that you may have regarding accessibility. And I will provide his email address as well. And that is accessibility@dot.nyc.gov. And the telephone number 929-441-9658. I will put all of this information in the chat so it's easier for you to access, but if you would like me to repeat the phone number or the email addresses, I'll be more than happy to do that as well. Last but not least, you can also contact your DOT Borough Commissioner. So each borough in the city does have a borough commissioner assigned to that particular borough. You can also reach out to them with any issues or anything that you would like to suggest to them as it relates to accessibility. So with that, I'll stop right there to see if there are any questions that you would like me to answer, or the rest of my team you would like us to answer. So I'll stop sharing my presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. That was a lot of information. And yes, we do have a couple of questions. One of them is more of a concern. This is Miriam Fisher says, concerned about bikes going through red lights on sidewalks, wrong way. This endangers people with disabilities, seniors, pedestrians, with increase in biking during the pandemic. It was becoming the new normal. I support more bikes and less car traffic, but this is also a concern that minimized as an issue. So I'm also concerned about this because with the new RFI and the new scooter pilot program that's coming into the Bronx and Queens, there's going to be an increase in micromobility and biking in all areas of the city. And one area that we come across this a lot is towards Jessica's neighborhood, where a lot of people bike. And there's this one intersection where you really have to look and both ways, even though biking traffic is supposed to go one way, you have to look in both directions because they ignore the traffic rules and stop signs. Where at one point we used to be able to cross the street with confidence that we weren't going to get hit by a car because they had the red light. Now we have to be concerned that we're going to get hit by a bike because they ignore them. So how will the DLT address these concerns?
That's a very good question and very valid one. I completely hear what you were saying. It is a concern that we have been hearing, and we certainly acknowledge that is an issue. We do have a program at DOT, our commercial cycling program, as well as our safety education outreach program, which works particularly with small businesses, right, where you may have delivery cyclists working for to ensure that they understand what the rules are when it comes to biking in the city. Like you said, there has been much more reliance on cycling in the city given the pandemic, and we certainly support that. But we also want to make sure that everyone, regardless of whether you're using a bike or biking or not, you're still feeling safe when you're crossing the street. So this way, if you have a vision disability or are not able to have peripheral vision, you may not see someone biking, coming from your right or from your left. So we are aware of the concern, and we do make sure that our programs are emphasizing and going over the rules that apply to commercial cycling. Obviously, with the pandemic, it has been more challenging reaching out a wider population, because we want to make sure that everyone's feeling safe. However, the message hasn't changed. We do work with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities to ensure that the information that we are providing through social media, it's not only accessible, but it's also understood, to send the message of, we need to make sure that cyclists are following the rules to prevent possible crashes from happening. So we also work with the NYPD, right, to ensure that they are aware of what the rules are, so that those can also be enforced. So the main goal really is to educate people. There seems to sometimes be that disconnect. They don't know what the rules are, but emphasizing them so that they are aware of what those are, to make all of us really, comfortable enough walking on the street is key. So those are some of the things that we do: public engagement, outreach directly with these businesses, as well as engagement with NYPD to enforce the rules.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some more accountability. And just a follow-up, Miriam Fisher says, should we license bikes for accountability? And you're right, NYPD ignores ticketing in a lot of areas. So maybe in Manhattan there might be a more accountability, but in North Bronx, the NYPD most likely going to turn a blind eye to someone blowing through a red light and ignoring the traffic while biking.
And some people can't see when they're crossing the street. They don't have the
Yeah.
ability to check 40 times when crossing the street. Something I wanted to add, and of course my brain completely just turned off. There's times where I know a lot of us wheelchair users, sometimes we have to utilize the bike lane too. I was riding in the street before bike lanes were cool, right? Because if we can be realistic, not all the sidewalks have curb cuts, or a lot of them are broken, or now with the outdoor seating, that's an issue too. So there's times where I am forced to go in the street for one reason or another. And cyclists are very angry folks. And I think if there's some way, I don't know if there's literature you hand out to them or on a website for them, whatever the case may be, but I think they think we're sitting in the bike lane for fun. Well, not sitting, but driving in the bike lane for fun, when a lot of the time it's about access issues. And of course, access issues should be fixed above anything else, so this way I don't have to go in the bike lane. But when that does happen, they should be told or educated, rather, that we're not in the street just because we're bored.
Something that can be brought up to admin, possibly. No awareness campaign.
And that is a really good point, Jessica. I have noticed people as well. My mom, sometimes she will use a push cart when she goes shopping, and she will also go onto the street. So it is a variety of users that are also benefiting from the bike lane. And I completely understand that, we have to tackle that culture of, and really communicate also to, are the streets safe enough for you to have the option to be able to use the street? We certainly don't recommend that, right? But I completely understand your point. If there's no pedestrian ramp or curb cut, as you mentioned, on that particular sidewalk, you are forced to go into the street. But we can certainly talk and expand on that possibility of adding it to a campaign along with Penman.
I will throw in, sometimes it may not even be an issue of a curb cut. Sometimes they're doing construction, so they have the wires and they have those big humps that go over the wires. Not everybody can navigate those safely, so they prefer to go in the street. So it's not always a curb cut issue.
And I'm gonna answer this one more question about the bike lanes or the concerns, and we're gonna move on. And Elizabeth says, more on the topic of bike lanes. There are some bike lanes, for example, near Prospect Park, where the bike lanes is immediately adjacent to the park entrance, adjacent to the park entrance, and interferes when access a ride needs to drop off or pick up consumers. So sometimes when they set up the bike lanes themselves, it kind of causes other obstacles. So I guess the takeaway would this be, when the DLT decides to put in a bike lane, maybe, reach out to the disability community in that area and see how it would affect certain changes. So moving on to the next question is, are outdoor seating enclosures required to be wheelchair accessible? I noticed many aren't and have a step down or a step or two up. So outdoor seating, the areas, do they have to be accessible?
They do. So if we are looking, whether they, obviously if they are on the sidewalk level, right? They most likely will be accessible because they're at the same height on the sidewalk. Certainly if they do use the roadway, they are required to provide a ramp so that there can be that accessibility option for, really for anyone, whether you're using wheelchair or if you are with a baby carriage, right? So they are required.
And Thomas Powers puts in the chat, he lives in Bayside, Queens, and I would say the majority of pedestrian sidewalks are done. For some reason, they forgot about four corners near 26th Avenue and Coperian Kennedy, where my building is elderly and disabled live in the building, something like that. So I guess there's four corners on 26th Avenue.
On 26, okay.
Thomas, if you can follow up with Hilda or email her or email one of us, either Jessica or Jose, with further information, we can forward that to the DLT.
Right, and Thomas, when you're referring to this question, are you talking about the pedestrian ramp? Right? So if that's what you're referring to, I will pass it on to my colleague, Nicole, who can expand a little bit more on that.
Hi, Thomas. Thanks for your question. Usually our program follows resurfacing. So locations that have been resurfaced are locations that we tackle for ramp construction first. So we can certainly look into this location and see what the status of the corners on 26th Avenue and Corporal Kennedy. And we can see what's going on with the location. If it hasn't been resurfaced, perhaps it was construction as a result of some other project or a complaint or, sidewalk violation nearby. But we can take a look and see what's going on here. No problem.
I have a question for you, Nicole.
Sure.
Now that you're here, I've lived in my neighborhood in the South Bronx for over 20 years. And there's this one particular area on 149th Street and 3rd Avenue. Well, not 3rd Avenue, and Park Avenue. And it goes across the MTA tracks. So it's like a bridge. There's 3 corners on that bridge where the curb cuts are, really steep.
Okay.
Like Jessica knows where I'm talking about. There's 4 of them. And I believe one of the reasons I was told that they were never done is because the bridge is owned by the MTA and aren't allowed, or for whatever reason. Do you guys work with local partners to try to get those curbs done, or it's not your responsibility to get those curbs done?
Well, we certainly work with other entities in work that they're doing. We also work with them in locations that we resurface. So if we perform the alterations such as resurfacing, then we are responsible for the ramps. And so we make sure that the work that we're doing is in line with the ADA. So if these are steeper, sometimes there's terrain there that we can't, fix or we can't change, right? So there are locations that will remain steep to the maximum extent feasible, and we look at them specifically during construction to see if we can bring them into compliance and what work is needed in order to make them as accessible as possible. But that location in particular, I can certainly like take a look and make sure we give you any information through Hilda that we find.
So it's 149th Street, Park Avenue. So that's, you have the corners where the bridge is at, the two on the west side, because the two on the east side of the street, they're done.
Okay.
The west side of the street aren't done, and on the other side of the bridge isn't done.
Well, sometimes we have locations that we can do very simply with in-house forces, and sometimes with DDC forces also. And then there's locations that are a lot more complex, such as on bridge structures. But if it's a matter of jurisdiction, then we look in to see who is responsible for doing what work. But this location, I can certainly look up and let you know what happened here.
And that's one area where Jessica and I prefer to stay in the street because the pedestrian ramp is pretty steep. So
one more comment about when we were talking about the benches and all of that, it triggered a thought about a bus stop where there's benches but it's elevated. I think we said something about this a minute ago, but forgive me, I'm having a little foggy brain. But it's on First Avenue, and I want to say it's like 17th Street or not on 96, but it's somewhere in Harlem, right before you get to the bridge. It's elevated. And when I let off the bus and I came off, I didn't know that there was a step. And luckily I landed on all four wheels, but I mean, that must be a hazard to some people. There's no yellow tape or any distinction between that elevated bit. And so that might be something to look into as well.
Thank you for bringing that up. So you're referring to a bus stop, right? Just to make sure that I got that right. Bus stop at First Avenue and 117th Street.
It's around there. You'll see it. It's the only part that's elevated. Yeah, but that's yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. Thank you. Thank you for that. We will definitely look into it. If you happen to be there again, and we'll certainly look at it. But if you happen to have a picture of it, feel free to share. Again, we will make sure to look at it and follow up. Thank you.
I have a question. When it comes to bus stops, does the DOT I guess dictate where the bus stop is going to go and how is it going to be formatted? So like on First Avenue, you have the ones that curve in to the sidewalk and doesn't extend out into the street area. So like they extend the sidewalk sometimes.
That is a very good question and a great example of what I mentioned before. We do coordinate with the MTA, particularly for bus stops, where we do not, MTA will tell us where they will potentially want a bus stop. And what we do is provide or approve where that bus pole would go. When it comes to any additional treatments, like maybe expanding the sidewalk of that particular bus stop, so there's more space on the sidewalk, that certainly is us. So we do collaborate with the MTA whenever those changes are happening that you're referring to. So I believe the jurisdiction of what Jessica mentioned may fall under DOT, but we do work with them. Particularly when it comes to bus poles and fixed option.
Now that we're talking about buses, is the DLT responsible for installing the bus stop benches or the bus shelters? Why are some bus stops without shelters?
Yeah, that's another very good question. We do. So we are responsible for, well, we have, so there are two types, right? So one, we have the city benches that I mentioned before, which we would be able to install them near a bus stop. And then if you're referring to the bus shelter, we do work with contractors where we can install them. I don't know the details of how that happens and how we determine and how those are prioritized, but I can certainly follow up with you and and let you know why some locations have them and maybe others not, and if how they are determined of where they would go.
You know, I have to throw this in really quickly. Maybe going forward in the talks of those shelters, maybe we should consider leaving a little space for a wheelchair user, because when those benches are there, we're sitting out in the rain because there's benches in the way. We can't fit under the shelter. So food for thought, that's all. But benches, we need benches too. I get that.
I do appreciate that. And you know what? I will definitely find out who within our agency works with that and how the dimensions, all of that happens. We probably do follow ADA compliance, but to your point, right? There's a human-centered approach that we need to consider as well as we look into this design. So thank you.
Jose, you gonna do?
Betty?
Yeah.
Go ahead, do that one.
Many of the pedestrian ramps issues that I have had recently seen. Oh, wow. Hold on. Let me restart. Thank you. Many of the pedestrian ramp issues that I have recently seen are because there is a hole in the street at its base. When reporting using the 311 app on my phone, I need to choose between sidewalk and potholes to report. Which is better to use, as often the ramp itself has issues too. A related issue is choosing an address, since that is required. Couldn't this be changed to the intersection and corner to locate the curb cut? I do try to use an address that I can find, but sometimes the closest is around the corner. I guess, for example, the Civic Center.
Actually, I had the same issue just recently with a gigantic hole on 25th and First Avenue. And I was like, they're requiring an address. And I put the Hunter College that's near it. And in my description, I was like, it's on the corner of the street and not near the building entrance. So yeah, it's kind of strange the way the reporting system is.
Yeah, we definitely recognize that. And when I don't know if you guys know about the website, the pedestrian program website, it's nycpedramps.info. And we have a specific module there where we can actually get information for the specific location. And it doesn't go through 311, it's tracked through our agency system. So I can paste the link to that in the chat for you, Betty, and also for you, for Jose.
Yep, that would be great. I was actually gonna look it up.
And it's specifically tailored for pedestrian ramps. So you can select if there's a problem in the median or if there's a problem in the corner. And you know, the more information that you give us, the better we can address it.
You know, I know you're gonna ask the blah blah. I can't talk today. I'm so sorry. I go get to one of those questions, but I want to ask one thing really fast. Bill, you're the one who does the permits, right? You're the one who speaks on the permits.
Our colleague Eric will be able to speak a little more on that. What's the question?
I can't hear. What was that?
There, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. So parking permits, right?
Yeah.
Great. So it is Clarice. Clarice, are you on the line? Can you hear us?
Can you write your question?
Okay. Well, go ahead and ask your question and we'll make sure to connect with her and see if we can answer that question for you.
I was just gonna say, I totally forgot. I'm brain farting today. Nope, I forgot. I lost it. But if I remember, I'll put it in the Q&A.
So we have another question here. I live in Lower Manhattan. Any updates on the plan for congestion pricing in Manhattan and how it might, I guess, affect those, with affect drivers living within the toll zone with New York City disabled parking placards. But yeah, you understand. So I guess it's one of those days. So with congested pricing, how would it affect those with the New York City disabled parking permits?
Barney, so that's a very good question. That's still in development. We had to certainly hold off a little bit during the pandemic, but we are back on planning the process of congestion pricing. And we certainly are looking at what are the pros and cons when it comes to accessibility, right? And we certainly have to look at many different aspects of this plan and who it could potentially impact. We're not only talking about certainly passengers with access to ride, but also, you know, small businesses or people that depend on a vehicle to get to the centered area that will be that will have the congestion pricing, right? So we do not have a plan yet. It is still in development, but rest assured that we are looking into all of these options so that if you are using access to ride or similar paratransit services, you are not left at a disadvantage.
Well, as a driver with a disability, sometimes I don't have the same transportation options as everyone else, or the accessibility, accessible stations near those areas. So my only option is to drive in. So if congestion pricing is going to affect someone with a, the PPP, the parking permit for persons with physical disabilities like myself, that's actually going to hurt someone like me who goes into the city regularly for work. But it's something to take into consideration.
Project, everybody, can you hear me now?
Yes, give
Okay.
me 1 second.
Congestion pricing right now, like Hilda was saying, that right now is under works with DOT, with traffic operations and with the MTA. So that's something that we can't discuss right now, but we are putting, because we deal with people with disabilities for our city disability permit and our state hang tags, we are working with DOT accessibility and MTA and traffic operations, and we are including all of the concerns of the disabled community when it comes to what's going to happen with people who actually have the city disability permits. So we are aware and we are in connection with our DOT disability and the MTA and raising all the concerns with the drivers that'll be affected by the congestion pricing plan.
All right. We have
My comment. I remember my comment. So I know that, I drive like Jose and I have the placard too, but everybody thinks it's so wonderful, right? Because, I can park anywhere. I'm fancy and what TD, blah, blah, blah. However, there are a lot of obstacles in our way when we're parking, whether it be a tree where the thing around the tree is too large, or newspaper stands, or a bike tie down. There's a lot of different stuff that are in the way. Is there any plans or thoughts about that? Like it's great because I don't want to let my ramp down in the middle of the street.
and it's especially a lot more difficult and challenging with, the bike lanes being put in on the sidewalk side and the streets being even more narrow. It makes it even more dangerous when we let out our ramps.
Okay, so this is the reason why we issue a city disability permit is because we have 8.6 million people in the city of New York, and you will not see blue handicapped spaces on the streets because we just don't have unfortunately, the room. When you move around New York City, you see muni meters, you see commercial parking, you see trucks loading and unloading, you've got government agencies, diplomats, everything. We have to, for the 5 boroughs, we have to cover everything. So that's why, number one, there's a 5-borough city disability permit that is only used for people with disabilities that have a disability that affects their mobility, that they only can use in the streets of New York. So we get at permits and customer service sometimes from people with disabilities complaining that there's too many people with disabilities with the permits. It gives you fluidity and mobility around the city to be able to park your vehicle wherever you can, get a space. And it's literally, we process over 150,000 permits a year. So when you imagine how many people with disabilities have accessibility, we cannot say to, to even our own agencies or state or a federal agency, that they have to move their parking, area. Just to give an example, when you see the signs with different agencies, literally those agency signs are usually around where the agency is located. Diplomats, they have diplomatic parking. You see doctor parking, and I totally get that you're talking about a lot of different things. Moving a tree, that has to do, possibly, if you're near a parks department. And it's literally the best thing to do is to send your concern to 311 or to the mayor's office on people with disabilities, so that particular, issue can be addressed, because you're talking, depending on the issue, it's going to be, concerning to one agency or another, and not necessarily DOT. Or it could be something that deals with the state agency, or a federal agency, or another city agency, so we can address that. So it's literally the fluidity of it. And if you have a disability, you are able to have both permits, both the hang tag and the city disability hang tag. The only problem, the city disability placard, the problem is, do not use a hang tag on the streets of the 5 boroughs, because you will get a ticket. It's only used for what we call off-street parking. So if you're in the outer counties, and if you're, like, for example, if you're in Manhattan and you're at the Costco Mall on 116th Street, you'll be able to park in the parking lot there in the handicapped spot, but you may have to pay for the parking, because the parking lot, everybody pays, but you use your hang tag there. Or if you're at a hospital that has a hospital parking lot, like if you go to Sloan Kettering or any of the hospitals, they may have a parking lot where you can use it. So yes, if there is a place where you are parking and you're having a concern, let us know about it, so we can research it and see, how it can be addressed and how it can be fixed. But it's literally the reason why we came up with city disability permit is to keep the fluid in parking. You're able to use that placard 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, with all the rules that come with it.
All right.
Really quickly, I just wanted to say, I know, Mary, you have to go, so I thank you. And go ahead, Jose. I was just say, if you guys can hang on for one more minute, because I hogged with my brain farts with the Q&A questions. If you want to get another question, Jose.
I actually wanted to give Michael Ring a chance, because he has a hard time typing, and want to give him the final questions.
Unmute. Okay, I have 2 questions. I'll try to be quick. The first one is about something we've been talking about, buses. I've noticed since COVID, I take buses around Brooklyn a lot, that there's been a lot more people parking bus stops or unloading. The buses are having a much harder time getting up to the curb, which makes it uneasy for myself and many other people to get on the bus, and then the bus has to block traffic. I think that there's been less enforcement, so people who are driving around have been parking in bus stops, and there's been a lot more double parking, which really slows down bus traffic. Is this something the DOT is aware of, or is going to do anything about? Can we have a ticket flip, public service announcements, not to park in the bus stops, not to leave the car there?
Thank you for that question, Michael. And the answer is, to what I was mentioning before, we do collaborate with other agencies. In this case, to that particular problem, it would be the NYPD when it comes to those type of issues. We certainly have seen that become, or not become, but it has been an issue. Certainly not vehicles parking on the bus stop, not allowing buses, which are the most accessible form of transportation to some degree, right? To provide that service, which becomes inaccessible when it cannot get to the curb. So this is a conversation and something that we do have with NYPD. But certainly, if it's a recurring problem in a particular location, do let us know so that we can work with the pertaining precinct and any other agencies involved.
Okay.
Also, Michael, I think the MTA is working on automated ticketing through, the cameras.
Yeah, that would be great, because people
They
think that
are.
it's been a lot.
I'm sorry, Mike.
That would be great. My other question is more specific to my own street corner. Where I live, it's a traffic fail. I mean, I have gridlock around the clock. Well, not around the clock. Rush hour gridlock makes it impossible for a pedestrian, especially someone with a mobility issue, to just cross the street. We've had the community police come to our building, and they kind of shrug at this point. I don't know where to go to get the lights fixed or traffic lanes altered. I live on the corner of 8th Avenue and Union Street in Park Slope. And in the afternoons, there's just gridlock from about 4 to 6 p.m. And now that the kids are going back to school, it's been even worse.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Okay, so you're talking about congestion issue at 8th and Union Street in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
it's-
mean, there's lots of issues. There's Flatbush Avenue, Grand Army Plaza. There's a parking garage up the block that double parks their cars, using up a traffic lane. But the police just shrug and they watch cars cause gridlock. They watch them go through the light and get stuck. They park there. The police park on the corner and watch. Like they're waiting for an accident. But sometimes I can't cross because there's a car in the way.
Michael, what I can do is I can touch base with one of our groups within DOT and see if there's any traffic analysis going on at that particular location or locations that you mentioned. So what I can do is I will share it. Actually, let me do that right now. I will put my information here on the chat so you can reach out to me directly and we can follow up and see if there's anything being studied there right now. Maybe there's something that we are doing on our end, but that I'm not particularly aware of. So how about we do that? I'll give you my information and we can continue this conversation.
All right, with that, I want to thank the DLT for joining us. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Clarice, Bill, Mary. Did I get everyone? And Jessica for joining us, and everyone who participated. This was great and very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for having us.
Yes.
And if anybody, I would like to share, if anybody has any questions about the disability permits, they can call our customer information line at 718-433-3100, or they could go on our website, nyc.gov/PPPDINFO.
Thank you, Clarice, and I included the phone number on the chat so you can have it. Again, thank you to our host, thank you to the ALCL interpreter and everyone that joined us today. Please know that this is an ongoing conversation. We'll be more than happy to have this again and continue talking about these issues that concern you. So thank you so much, everybody.
Tell Edmund the next one I would like to see him there.
Well, I'll make sure to let him know. Yes, and thank you for my colleagues as well for joining me today. I appreciate it and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mary.
Take care, all.
Please excuse the fact that I dropped in and out of there. I just kept getting booted. So
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. It just kept kicking me out. I'm like, why?
Technology.
Yeah. All right. Have a good day, guys.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.